We gather, shared vision, unflagging in our mission, to invest in dreams, live the Great Commission. Poverty is not God's design. We are not resigned to this blight on humankind. So we lend our God-given influence to build up the people God's made as we tear down barriers that stand in their way. God made us all to flourish. We embrace our calling to love God and neighbor, firmly declare there are no commands greater. And His love demands action, pulls us from distraction, invites us to see in ourselves responsibility, to envision amid poverty, possibility. This is what can be when we come together. They gather to worship, learn, work, and pray, bright hope for a future that starts today. An invitation into community, unity, forging opportunity. Not passive recipients, but active participants in God's work of transformation. God's love comes alive. His image bearers thrive when we come together.
My name is Peter Greer, and on behalf of the global team of Hope International, we want to welcome you to Hope's second annual global virtual event. And we are thrilled to gather with you and with friends all around the world. Now, we're never going to forget last year and all of the disruption. And last year, we were unable to gather in person, and so we created a virtual event. And at the time, we thought that was going to be the one and only time that we were going to have a virtual event. I'm so thankful that as we gather today, we are able to have in-person events again, but we also saw that there is benefit of having an event like this. And last year, over 1,000 friends from 25 countries around the world gathered, and we wanted to provide an opportunity to gather together as the global team of Hope International, and we are so thankful that you are here. One of the things that an event like this allows us to do is to hear directly from the global team. Many times when we have in-person events, there are those of us that try to tell stories from around the world, but the benefit of a virtual event is we can hear directly from some of the global team members. And today, we're going to hear from Leslie Jules. He's Hope's country director in Haiti. We're going to hear from Ghenadie, Russu, Executive Director of Invest Credit, Hope's partner in Moldova. We are going to hear stories, and we are going to celebrate what God is doing around the world. We just heard in that introductory video by Joy Ike, she said, God's love comes alive, His image bearers thrive when we come together. And that is true for the families that we serve around the world as they are entered into the joy of Christ-centered community. But all of us have experienced that as well over the past 18 months. All of us have experienced the joy of coming together in Christ-centered community. And so whether you've walked with Hope for 10 years or 20 years, or whether these are your first 10 minutes, we are so glad that you're here. Welcome to the community of Hope International. Now at Hope International, we have a clear mission, and we exist to invest in the dreams of families in the world's underserved communities as we proclaim and live the gospel. And we do this through three primary approaches, and you're going to hear some acronyms around Hope, and I wanted to give you a lay of the land as we're starting this event, but the first is savings groups. And individuals in savings groups, they come together in partnership with the local church. In fact, we don't even want individuals to know the name of Hope International. We want this service to be seen as an outreach of the local community, of the local church, as they build capital, as members take out loans, as they invest in businesses, and as they come together in Christ-centered community. We are so passionate about Christ-centered savings groups. But we also have formal financial institutions, microfinance institutions, and essentially those are banks that provide loans and a safe place to save and other services to help family invest in businesses and provide for their families. And then we know that as we invest in entrepreneurs, some of them scale enterprises, and we celebrate some of the entrepreneurs that we serve that started with maybe a $100 loan, but now have become the job creators in their community. They are ready to scale, and so we continue to walk with them with larger loans, additional training, to empower them to create jobs and serve their communities. So really though, all three of these models, these are simply approaches for what we believe it takes to invest in families, to live out the hope of the gospel, and to see communities come together, grow in their relationships with God and each other, and to watch individuals thrive with all the gifts, all the abilities that God has given them. But ultimately, as we come together, as we think about this work that we're doing, we are reminded of the families that we serve. There are families around the world that have had a challenging several years, and the reality is their challenges are not over yet. And so we wanted to introduce you to one family, to one story of one entrepreneur, of the individuals that we are so privileged in partnership with you to serve around the world. So this is Carrolle's story.
After Carrole Moussengue had to close her daycare due to coronavirus quarantines in the Republic of Congo, she witnessed firsthand how God can bring good out of what began as crisis. With children no longer able to attend daycare, Carrolle's revenues stopped, and she could no longer afford the rent on her building. Her landlord evicted her business. While she looked for a new location and waited for permission to reopen, Carrole cooked and sold meals in front of her home to provide for her family. In the midst of this challenging season, a friend told her about Hope Congo. With her first loan of $464, Carrole not only reopened her daycare in a new location, but she also extended her services to achieve her long-held dream of welcoming elementary school students. During lockdown, it was a difficult time for Carrole spiritually, as churches were unable to meet. But, she says, when I joined the loan group, I retrieved a rhythm of prayer. She even began to teach her students to pray. Some then taught their parents. Meeting Hope Congo is one of the most beautiful things of my life because I found lost hope. I was able, thanks to the activities of Hope, to change my way of seeing my life and that of others, to understand the meaning of sharing and the love of God. 8 employees work alongside Carrole in the school, which now enrolls 84 pupils, up from just 19 before the pandemic. When one student didn't return after lockdowns were lifted, Carrole searched for the little boy. His family had moved, but Carrole visited the family in their new home. She learned that the boy's grandmother, who had financed his education, had passed away. His family could no longer afford tuition. In Christ's love, Carrole committed to providing him with an education at her school and a meal each day, inviting his parents to simply pay as they were able.
I love that story of Carrole, and we know that that story of Carrole is just one story of one entrepreneur, and there are so many other stories like that. Over the past year, like never before, I have seen the impact of Hope International. And when the world has felt like it is falling apart, I have loved that this is an organization and really the global church that has been coming together. We have seen resilience, we have seen resolve, and we have seen individuals loving well in the midst of so much disruption. So tonight we're going to hear more of that. We're going to hear more stories, and we're not going to focus on the problems, we're going to focus on the opportunity right now to continue showing up and sharing the love of Jesus. We believe in the local church as well, and many of the stories that you hear, there's going to be the element of the church and the role that the church plays as we partner with local churches to fulfill the Great Commission. So what we're going to do to begin, though, is we're going to hear a word of encouragement from Chilobe Kalambo. And Chilobe is a friend. I have known Chilobe for almost 25 years. And Chilobe and I got to know each other when we were both playing soccer at Messiah University. But after that, I believe that I did not really get to know Chilobe until we traveled together to Zambia. I got to see the community where he grew up, which is a community where Hope International serves. And while we were there, I'll never forget the moment that he was able to meet some youth in that, and he was able to share his story, and he was able to give a word of Christ-centered hope to these students, and to see their eyes light up as they got to hear Chilobe's story. And I am so grateful that Chilobe is going to share a word of devotion with us. I know you are going to enjoy it. And then after Chilobe shares, we're going to have the opportunity to worship together. If you've been part of Hope International, if you've traveled with us, you know that music is a core part of who Hope is, and you cannot go and experience the ministry of Hope International without having songs, and so we wanted to start our time with that as well. We're going to be led in worship by Marlen Lane. She is a recording artist, originally from Honduras. She now lives in Charlotte, North Carolina, and she is married to John Lane, Hope's microfinance analyst. And so I am so grateful. You're going to hear from Chilobe, and then we are going to worship together, being led by Marlen, as we continue to enjoy this time together.
Hello, it's an honor and a privilege to be with you. So I wanted to share a story that has really been impactful to my life. And it's a story that Luke shares in Acts chapter 20, verses 7 to 12. It's the story of Eutychus and Paul. Luke will start in verse 7 by saying something very, very important. He says that on the first day of the week, they were gathered for the purpose of communion. And that's very important because that was the purpose that the original church gathered. They gathered to have what was known as an agape feast, which was a love feast. They gathered to fellowship with one another, to hear from one another, to bear one another's burdens, to share a meal with one another. This was a group of folks that didn't have a whole lot of resources, and so this meal that they had together was family time, but it was also probably the best meal that they would have that day and maybe even that week. And so they're gathered together for that purpose. But on this specific Sunday, Paul's in town, and Paul's on his way to Jerusalem, and he's going to be, we know what's going to happen to Paul in Jerusalem. So this is the last time that he's going to have to share with these people. And so Luke tells us that Paul is very long-winded. He talks all the way through the morning. But in the midst of Paul having a conversation with folks, Luke wants to introduce us to a person named Eutychus. This is a young man who is a slave, and because he's a slave, he's been up working very early, since 4 o'clock or so in the morning, and he's coming to the service that evening to fellowship, but also to have a meal. And because he's tired, he's hungry, he's beaten up, Luke tells us that he's sitting on a windowsill, nodding off and about to fall asleep. Before Luke tells us that in verse 9, he says something very, very important in verse 8 that I want to read to us. And he says this in Acts chapter 20, verse 8. He says, "There were many lamps in the upstairs room where we were meeting." In other words, Luke wants us, his audience, to know that there was enough light in the room that evening for someone to look up and see that there was somebody on the peripherals in their midst who was hurting. But that doesn't happen because the folks that are there that day, typically they come to worship and to fellowship with one another and to have community with one another. But on this Sunday, they came in to hear, to be fed by Paul. All good stuff, by the way, but they come in with an inward focus, and they do not look out and see the people that are hurting on the peripherals. And so what happens is obvious. Eutychus simply cannot fight this thing on his own. He needs his brothers and sisters to step in on his behalf, but they don't do it because they're focused on Paul, and what happens next is obvious. He falls to his death. I think what Luke wants us to know in this text is that wherever the people of God are gathered, there is enough light in the room to see those who are hurting and those who are in need. And the Bible tells us in Matthew 5:14 says that we are the light of the world, a city on a hill that cannot be hidden. And that's why, as a board member and a child of African soul, being from Zambia, I'm so grateful for the people and the partners and the mission of Hope International. I'm grateful for the leadership of Hope International that is taking us as an organization into the frontiers, to those people who are overseen and not ministered to. I'm thankful for the passion of the family of Hope, both the staff and the partners of Hope who want to drive this mission forward. I'm so thankful also that the story doesn't end with Eutychus dying. The Bible tells us that Paul heads down. He hears about Eutychus' death, and he stumbles upon a tragic scene. We don't know how long Eutychus has been lying dead. What we do know, though, is that Eutychus came to the house of the Lord that evening to be ministered by the people of God, and he ends up dying. And I don't think he planned that. And it's as if Paul now wants to course correct, and he goes down and he finds Eutychus lying there. And he does something amazing. This is one of the few texts in the Bible where there's not a command that is uttered, there's not a word that is said, but a miracle of such magnitude happens. And it happens because Paul acknowledges and he recognizes the state that Eutychus is in, and he embraces him, and he's filled with compassion. And it happens because Paul touches Eutychus, and he hugs him, and he embraces him, and he restores him to life. I think as believers, we all want to do great things. We all want to do big things. But I think one of the greatest things that the Holy Spirit has given us is this ability to discern and to recognize and acknowledge people who are hurting and who are in need. And that's why I'm so thankful for Hope International and its mission, and so thankful for all of y'all, and so blessed by this text. And I hope that you are blessed too.
Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you, oh, we live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever shame. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you, oh, we live for you. And holy, there is no one like you, there is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Oh, I will build my life upon you. Oh, yes, I will. And I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. Holy, there is no one like you, there is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder, show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me.
Well, thank you, Chilobe and Marlen, for leading us in that time of the Word and then also in worship together. And that is how the ministry of Hope International, that's how all of our gatherings begin around the world. The opportunity to hear and to learn together in Scripture, and then to sing and worship together. And I am so thankful that we've been able to experience that today with all of you. We are now going to have the opportunity to hear from Leslie Jules. He is our country director for Hope Haiti. And if you have been following the news over the last several months, you know the compounding challenges in Haiti. No other nation where we work has felt like it has hit wave after wave of challenge after challenge. And in some ways, it can be hard to hold on to hope when it feels like there are just so many challenges. But I can tell you that I respect Leslie so much for his courage, for his compassion, and for his commitment. And we have seen all of those over the last year. We have seen his courage by the fact that Leslie remains in Haiti. We've seen that in the way that even after an earthquake, Leslie's figuring out ways of showing Christ's love to those individuals that have just lost everything. We see his creativity even in the midst of a pandemic where he figured out how they could manufacture face masks as a way of providing employment opportunities for individuals that were having so much disruption. And we've seen his commitment when Leslie has the opportunity to go and find other employment in other places and other safer spots. I so admire Leslie's commitment to the nation of Haiti that really is a reflection of his commitment to Jesus Christ. So I'm so thankful that we're going to hear from Leslie, and Leslie is going to be interviewed by Becky, and Becky leads our marketing team. So thank you, Becky, for interviewing Leslie. I'm so grateful to hear what you have to share.
Well, Leslie, thanks so much for making the time to talk with us today.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you.
Leslie, could you tell us more about the unexpected events that came onto the scene earlier in this year for Haiti?
I think first of all, it was the fact that the president, was assassinated. This is something that we were not expecting. This is not something that we are used to, having president being assassinated in their homes, and it came as a shock, and it really affected everything, in terms of the country not having a president. And so therefore we have an interim prime minister not being able or not having the power, to make some kind of important decisions. And that has actually affected everything, the economy, and also the fact that we have had an earthquake that took place in the south, pretty much in 3 districts that we have in the south, and it was a complete devastation. Most of the physical infrastructures collapsed, and we lost so many lives, and even family members of our saving group members have lost their lives, and it was a difficult situation to manage. So these 2 events actually, they kind of shape the reality of the country. And also that has, they have affected somehow the saving ministry.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. What are the ripple effects of those 2 events and maybe the storms that followed? What has life been like for people in the aftermath?
So we have a lot of people that have been displaced. Actually, 15,000 people that have been displaced from an area called Martissan. And this is not without consequences, and even on private sector, people not being able to go to their jobs because they cannot communicate with the rest of Port-au-Prince area, and it's been challenging. And even until today, gangs are still ruling the country, so they decide, where people can go, where people are not allowed to go, and it looks like the government is not. I don't want to say the government is not willing, but the government doesn't have the capacity to really contain that situation and make sure that we're back to normalcy.
Could you help us understand maybe what life is looking like in the last few weeks for folks in that region in the south where the earthquakes were most prevalent and where some of our savings group members and partners saw a fair amount of loss of life, which is some of the largest in the Hope Network in our history of operation, to hear that so many people lost their lives. What are things like on a daily basis there?
I mean, for them it's difficult because this is something that they were not expecting, and it just happened. And losing loved ones, losing their homes, and losing their businesses. And it has been a very difficult situation, and especially for the response to come, because if you remember, we had an earthquake in 2010, and it was mismanaged. And therefore, the government was hesitant for NGOs to come down and creating the chaos that we have experienced 11 years ago. And the NGO community, the international community on its side, was just waiting for leadership from the government just to know, how do they respond. But in the meantime, you will have people suffering, people who needed help. And that's why this is something that we took on ourselves, just to see how we could quickly respond to people, especially when you look at the South area. This is where we have 69% of our saving groups. And this is where we have actually 3 out of 4 partners located there. And so we had to do something. And we thank God that we had the right structure in place in order for us to do something, because we have the way that the ministry is structured. For every denomination, there is a ministry coordinator, and there's a regional coordinator, and there is a church facilitator, and then you have the church. So with that structure, we can respond swiftly to any situation that happens on the ground, and which is what we did. And at the end, Hope International Haiti was the first organization to respond to the situation of the people in the South. And of course, at some point, we involved other organizations in the process, because they didn't have that kind of structure in order for them to respond.
It's so cool to see that in a situation where maybe the government is limited in its ability to respond, especially in the countryside, the church is the one who's there and can respond quickest. Praise God. Well, to someone who's listening to this for the first time, Leslie, they might say, okay, lots of challenges, lots of hardship. How do these people have money to save? And what difference can saving make stacked against challenges like these?
It's really based on their understanding of what it means to save, how this is going to provide hope for the future, for them, for themselves, for their kids, and also the possibility that they have now to support one another, especially when they are located in an area where government services are not always available. It's really in the area of changing mindset. It's changing culture. Instead of people having a culture where they are waiting for an NGO or waiting for the government to come and fix their problem, now they're thinking about, how do I solve my own problem? And that's the beauty of the ministry. And that's why when we first start to introduce the ministry, we talk about broken relationships. How broken relationships are the root causes of poverty. And one of the it's relationship with God first, that people don't have. And by relationship with God, we also emphasize the fact that people are not always knowledgeable when it comes to Judeo-Christian values. And this is so important. I mean, you can have church, you can have, all kinds of activity, but until you understand who God is, the way that God has created you, until you really understand Judeo-Christian values, how critical they are in the way that we relate with God, with other people, with the environment. So this is something that can actually, create a situation where we cannot be all that God, intended us to be. So we start with that, relationship with God. And we also talk about relationship with self, in a sense that people should develop healthy relationship with themselves, having a good understanding that they are created in the image of God. Therefore, they have absolute dignity and they are wonderfully made. Now, the third area is relationship with other people. I mean, that's what sometimes economists would call social capital. It's the possibility for people to come together, bringing their resources together. Because one person can accomplish certain things, but people getting together, they can accomplish they can accomplish more. And this is where and people have found that, being in the saving group really helps them. It really helps connecting to church. It really helps in a sense that people are now seeing that, the limitation of, any individual effort that they could have done on behalf of themselves, their family, or their community. But they can do a lot by getting together. The saving ministry is really not about money. It's really not about how much you save. It's bigger than that. It's about changing culture. It's about changing mindset. It's about developing a Christian mind to some extent. Because the saving ministry is built on the model of Acts chapter 2, verse 42 to 47, where the early church was, putting everything together just to make sure that there are no needy among them. And let me tell you, in a time where you have disasters like earthquake, like hurricanes, this is where we see the saving ministry being most impactful, in a sense that that people now, they can really see the church at work. And this is the type of feedback that we actually received, from the pastors, telling us that even though many churches have collapsed, because of the earthquake, it wasn't the church that actually collapsed. It was just a building. The church keeps on meeting, and they seeing that how the saving ministry is actually helping, people, helping mobilizing people, and caring for one another. And this is just this is how church should actually respond to difficult situation. And that's what we see in scripture. And that's what we're also seeing at work in these days.
Could you share maybe a few more stories? I love how you light up when you get specific about savings groups. Leslie, could you tell us a few more stories, maybe of individual men and women, or an individual group, or an individual church where you're seeing hopeful signs in Haiti?
I heard the story about a lady when we asked her, why did you join the saving ministry? And she told us something that is really heartbreaking. She told us that she had a son who was sick, and she went to the bank to withdraw money in order to pay for medicine and other things that was needed. And when she went to the bank, she could not withdraw any funds because they did not have any connection with the headquarters. So she could not withdraw because the internet was down, so they could not communicate. So therefore, she told us that she lost her son because of that. And she's been telling us that now she's a member of a saving ministry. And she said, if I was part of a saving ministry, such a thing would have never happened to me. Because I know that, other members would reach out to support. I know that the emergency fund would be there for me to address that situation. So these are the type of stories that we usually receive, that people, they don't feel alone. They feel that they are part of a community. And that's why we don't hear stories about people walking away from the saving ministry. We don't hear such a thing.
Leslie, as we wrap up today, how can we as a Hope Network and Hope Family be praying for the ministry in Haiti and for Haiti overall? Our
most urgent need is security, so that we can continue to do our work. So we need God to intervene to provide security for our staff, for our volunteers and the members, and for the citizens of the country overall.
Thank you, Leslie. Appreciate the time.
My pleasure.
And we could sit here and listen to you for a lot longer. You're a great storyteller.
Seigneur, dans moment ça, n'a prié pour Haïti, Seigneur. Haïti a traversé un moment critique, un moment danger. Seigneur, tant qu'en petite maman pour la coucher, peuple a souffert, il pas gain manger, il pas gain de l'eau. Il n'y a pas de monde pour aider. Bon Dieu, papa, nous demandons dans moment ça. L'ange met au bon Dieu. Aider Haïti, bon Dieu. Sauver Haïti, bon Dieu. Papa, nous connaissons. Même gens qui sont sensibles pour nous, ou qui sont sensibles pour Haïti. Nous prions pour tout le team, bon Dieu, qui a just cherché une route Nous prions pour tout team yo bon Dieu qui a travaillé pour aider tout le monde. Camper avec yo bon Dieu. Ba yo force bon Dieu. Nous prions pour toute famille yo, tout team yo qui pas qu'à jouer non en côté pour yo aller bon Dieu. Kebe yo bon Dieu. Bon Dieu nous dit merci et pas pour ça ou fait pour nous, mais c'est pour comment nous yen et pas là seulement mais dans tout pays. Nous disons merci bon Dieu. C'est non nous prions. Amen.
Thank you, Christina, for that time of worship and prayer. And thank you, Leslie, for sharing with us about the Savings Group ministry in Haiti, and especially for the way that in the midst of so much disruption, so many challenges, there is hope. And that line that you shared about the reality that in the midst of all that's going on, people can see the church at work. That is our hope at Hope International, that it would be seeing the church at work. And we know that what we just heard from Leslie about what's happening in Haiti, that we're seeing that in the other countries where hope operates as well. We're seeing the way that the church is responding. And in Malawi, we have partnered with a local church to serve refugees that have been fleeing ethnic violence, implementing savings groups in the Dzaleka refugee camp to help restore hope and dignity. We're seeing that in Rwanda. Recently, there was houses that were collapsed during a heavy rainstorm, and no surprise, it was the savings groups that rallied alongside them, praying, visiting, standing with the family, and rebuilding. And not just that, but in South Asia, we're seeing the church reach out to distribute food. And even the government that historically has been hostile to Christianity has been working with the team on the ground to provide escorts, permission to travel, and the relationships with the government have continued to deepen. All that to say, around the world, even though the headlines are captured by challenge and bad news, we are seeing the church arise. We are seeing hope unleashed. We are seeing lives transformed. Next, we're going to have the opportunity to hear from Russu. He's the Executive Director of Invest Credit. That is our partner program in Moldova. And I've gotten to know Gena over the last 15 years that he has been with Invest Credit. He's been involved in numerous economic development initiatives. If you watch Moldovan TV, you will see him periodically on there as a commentator. And he is so intentional about the way that he leads with focus on the mission and building a strong team around him. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to hear now from Gena about what God is doing in Moldova.
Well, Gena, thank you so much for being with us today.
It's really my pleasure to be with you today.
Gena, a lot of people might not know much about Moldova, so maybe you could tell us a little bit about the country where you live and some of the challenges and opportunities that Moldova is facing right now.
Moldova is really a tiny country sandwiched between Ukraine and Romania. A population of Moldova is 3.5 million people. We became independent from the Soviet Union in 1991. And when any country breaks out from an empire, it has aspirations and dreams. We really had our hopes and dreams that things will go well. We will integrate into European community. As an independent state, we will develop our traditional industries and things will flourish. However, I have to say that for the last almost 30 years, we have been struggling in many ways, economically, socially, politically, and the path to independence is not easy. You know, it took about 40 years for God to take Egypt out of the minds of Israelites, and it may take about 40 years for Moldovans to truly enjoy the independence and become a country of which its people will be proud of. Moldova has lost millions, well, close to 2 million people since its independence. And many of the people who left to Western Europe or United States or Canada are the brightest mind of Moldova. It's difficult to rebuild a country where your brightest people are around, but we are working very hard to make Moldova attractive again. And thankfully, for the last few years, there were some bright minds who came back to Moldova, one of them being our current president, who graduated from Harvard and worked for World Bank.
So we have a situation where a huge percentage of the population want to leave their home country. Families are separate. Communities maybe are lacking some of the age groups that a normal community would have. But enter InvestCredit. Why do you think it's so important to be creating financial tools and opportunities for jobs in Moldova right now?
Well, I think we are contributing to two things. One, we give hope to people. Whenever people think about an idea, whenever they have an idea, they often come to a realization that in order to make that idea alive, they will need some resources. And InvestCredit is the one who comes alongside people with ideas and help them evaluate the idea, make sure that the idea is marketable, is good enough to be implemented, make sure that there are many other resources in place in addition to the financial resources. And if all pieces come together, then we will provide financing for those ideas. People will stay in Moldova as long as they have hope. And we have noticed that every time we would provide a loan and people will start their tiny business or small business, they will have a connection with the country. They will feel they are working for the future of their family and their children. And this makes a big difference.
How does the fact that InvestCredit is Christ-centered, how does that impact that message as well?
Well, people see that we are different, and it's encouraging to us when people, because they know that we are believers and Christians, are the ones who starting to open their hearts and start talking with us, not only as an organization who helps and supports them, a partner organization, but the organization that also holds some spiritual weight and has some spiritual values and openness for the spiritual impact. We have had countless discussions with our clients about spiritual matters. We have had many situations when clients asked us to pray. We have had even more situations when we offered a prayer and we received an yes, and our clients became very close to us. To the point where we, our loan officers, witnessed to them and even started Bible studies, invited them to different events. So the impact is there. Jesus is alive in Moldova, and that his work and ministry continues in many ways, including through our brothers and sisters who are working with InvestCredit.
Gena, how are you encouraged? What are you finding hope in with some stories of how men and women are investing in Moldova? This week I've been thinking and meditating about some of our veterans, one of them being Jacob. Jacob, I think, works with us for 15 years. We have invested around $18,000 in his dreams. He started very small with just $200 loan. And he has experimented a lot. And today he has a number of micro businesses. He has really diversified. He has a business in rabbit breeding. He has open field farming. He has orchards. He is also on the small scale a real estate business by buying and selling plots of agricultural land. And in addition to that, he is a preacher, a leader in his church who has led many people to Christ. I think Jacob is one of the outstanding clients. He definitely brought to InvestCredit more than 50 clients who he has discipled, trained, and mentored personally, helping them to develop their micro businesses as well. Are there any specific stories that you could share or examples, glimpses of how InvestCredit is enabling families to stay together? Maybe a specific family or entrepreneur that you know of who maybe would be a great candidate for moving somewhere in Western Europe, but instead they're able to stay with their family and invest in their community? I remember vividly my visits to another client of InvestCredit. His name is Valentin, and her name is Natalia. Valentin is of Polish origin. So being of Polish origin and having some connections with Poland, he could have relatively easy move to Central Europe.
and probably enjoy a good life there. To the contrary, he has decided to start a business. He got his first loans and bought some land. Then he used additional loans to build his business of raising goats and sheep. And eventually he has built a very successful cheese production business that employed not only him and his wife, but also his children. And I remember clearly how proud he was that his children are with him, and they all together could live in Moldova and enjoy a good life.
That's beautiful. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Ghenna, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. We've been really encouraged and inspired by what you've shared with us today.
Thank you for the opportunity to share. I was encouraged as much as you were.
Well, thank you, Becky, and thank you, Ghenna, for sharing more about InvestCredit's work in Moldova. And one of the things that came out again is this idea that when we invest in entrepreneurs, the impact is felt by the entire family. And I love the opportunities for families to get involved in the work, and more than that, for opportunities for their kids in the future as well. But most of all, I loved hearing how Jesus is alive in Moldova. And at Hope International, you know that we love stories. Yes, we love stats and we pay attention to a lot of them, but we also love stories because stories remind us that behind all of this work, behind all of this work that we do, there are real people facing real obstacles and yet are unleashing hope in incredible ways. And God is at work. We know that, and it's not just in Moldova, but in Rwanda. I love how Marcel and John started with a $48 loan to start selling flour and fish in a marketplace, and they've continued to grow that. Now they have a grocery store, several other businesses. The impact is felt not just by their family and on their children, but they employ 41 individuals, and I love their generosity flows to their community. Over 200 people in their community now have been provided health insurance by their generosity. And it's not just in Rwanda, but in Manuel Chimango, he started a savings group for ex-convicts. And as they gathered together, these individuals that had been excluded by the community were brought together. They rent a field, they farm together, and they are having hope for the future as they plant, as they work, as they grow, as they pray together. I love what is happening through Emmanuel. And it's not just there, but in Paraguay, Anna Cipriano accessed small loans from Hope's partner, Diaconia. She expanded her general store and ice cream shop. And for her as well, the impact is felt by her family. Her 3 teenage sons help run the shop. She's passing her skills on to her children, and she talks about the inheritance that she is building for them. These are stories that have a common theme. This common theme of seeing individuals, seeing their gifts and abilities, investing in them, and then watching what happens on the next generation and on the community at large. We are so thankful for these stories. We are so thankful for your part in every single one of them. At Hope International, we believe in the privilege and power of praying together. And so now we invite you to pray with members of the Hope International team over the vision for the future of this organization. And then Erika Quaile, Hope's Senior Director of Development, will share with you more about our vision for Hope and the years to come. So let's pray together.
Lord, we come to you with praise on our lips. You are so deeply loving, so unequivocally good, so mighty, majestic, and gentle. You are beyond our understanding and so worthy of our trust. We worship you. 25 years into this mission you've given Hope International, we gratefully accept your invitation to envision what you might do next. We know, we believe, that you can do exceedingly more than we can ask or imagine. So today we imagine.
Father God, 25 years from now, we imagine the Hope Network faithfully maintaining our clear resolve to accelerate the end of poverty in all its forms. In that day, we still acknowledge Christ as the active ingredient in everything we do. God, we ask for the courage to remain prayer-dependent, kingdom-oriented, and focused on those we serve. In the future, help us to explore new products and services, yet retain a narrow focus that we might strike true in our aim to address the root causes of material poverty.
Panginoon, sa nakaraang 25 taon, nababanaag namin ang milyon-milyong mga kalalakihan at kababaihan na patuloy na pinaghihirapang alamin at hanapin ang kanilang kabuluhan sa iyo at sa pagsunod sa iyo. Mangyari nga nawa ito. Aming pinapangarap na darating na ang panahon na ang mga negosyo ay lalago. Ang mga kita ng mga tao ay magiging regular at ang kanilang mga impok ay lalago. Pangarap din namin na ang mga pagkain sa pagkainan ay magiging sapat. Ang mga bata ay lalaking malusog at malakas at dadami pa ang magkakatrabaho at makapagtatapos sa pag-aaral nila. Nawa po ay mabawasan ng tuluyan ang gutom, ang pagiging mahina ng mga mahihirap at magkaroon na ng sapat na pagpipilian ang mga tao.
Mu myaka 25 iri imbere ushoboze Hope International kwitanga n'umunezero mwinshi kandi ititaye ku nyungu zayo mu kuba umwe mu bari mu gikorwa kidasanzwe c'ubwami bwawe. Dufashe kubona ayandi mashirahamwe dufise inkoro imwe nk'amashirahamwe mavukanyi, ariko ntituyafate nk'amashirahamwe duhiganwa. Uko ibihe bigenda, Mana, dufashe kuba ministeri ikora ibirama yama ivyamwa birengeye kure ibikorwa by'amashirahamwe yacu. Turagusavye uzodufashe gukorera abantu benshi kandi benshi cane, tudatakaje na gato intumbero yacu.
In 25 years, I pray that we continue to share the gospel boldly, offering financial tools whether it's in shortest supply. We pray that we'll continue to support the work of the church wherever we go. May we always view the church as our crucial, essential partner and not just a distribution channel. And Lord, we ask that in that day, we hope local partners will number in the tens and tens of thousands.
Dios, tú colocas a los solitarios en familias. Por eso anhelamos que aquellos que se sintieron excluidos y abandonados encuentren amor, plenitud y pertenencia en una comunidad centrada en Cristo. Los vemos adoptando un propósito gozoso al servir a los demás. Imaginamos familias enteras, pueblos y grupos de personas que rechazan los agravios del pasado para caminar en comunión unos con otros. Dios, visualizamos una transformación radical de una generación de madres y padres. Y lo vemos repercutir en la próxima generación, reorientando el curso de la vida de sus hijos y los hijos de sus hijos.
Jesus, we dream of your church being at the center of a beautiful story of restoration, reconciliation, and poverty alleviation. In part because the Hope Network has equipped her with tangible tools for outreach. As she pours herself out more fully, she multiplies. And as she multiplies, Hope can consider retiring operations in some countries. God, we imagine a day when all people from all corners of society have taken notice of the undeniable impact Christ's beloved church has had in some of the world's hardest to reach communities.
Today,
hoy, and in that day, toda la gloria es tuya.
All the glory is yours.
The lights are on. From the story of Eutychus to the hope amidst tragedy in Haiti, to the families who, against the odds, are being equipped to stay together in Moldova, we have witnessed hope in this last hour, and we hold on to that hope. In a world that might tempt us to believe that divisiveness is winning the day, those of you gathered with us from all over the country and all across the world speaks differently. Your choice to join us here, to be a part of something greater than yourself, is an antithesis to that divisiveness. It is a witness of hope and to the truth we know and read in John 1:5, that the light shines in the darkness and the darkness has not overcome it. The lights are on. We have enough light to see. And so we hold on to hope and to this prayer we just heard as we dream of bowls being filled, children growing strong, employment rates rising. We pray now and into the future for wholeness and belonging in Christ-centered community. We dream of the church being at the center of a beautiful story of restoration, reconciliation, and poverty alleviation. And we don't just dream of it. We celebrate the opportunity we have to be a part of it, as together we work diligently to serve more families sooner and to accelerate the end of poverty in all its forms. There's more work to be done, more families to reach. Would you join us? We've seen this work make a significant difference, especially over this last year. We have evidence that it's working. Here's what we know. The people we serve were better able to weather the storm because of their involvement with Hope International. We want to invite you to join us to reach more families through this mission so that hardworking men and women will not only be able to weather the storm, but have the opportunity to lift their eyes to the hope that they have in Christ, to the chance to generously invest in and impact their own communities, and toward pursuing and dreaming about a different future for themselves and their children because they have access to Christ-centered capital. And here's another thing we know. We cannot do this work alone. Over the years, we've seen thousands of people join us from around the world in praying for the mission of hope, in continuing to learn more through joining events like this, and in investing financially in the remarkably gifted and hardworking families we serve. As I share, you'll see a link on your screen that you can go to join us. We're excited about the opportunity for you to come alongside us in prayer. We hope you will consider doing that. I want you to go ahead and pull up that website that you see there on your screen. As you do that, you'll see the opportunity to join us in giving financially to the work that we are doing around the world. Tonight, we have a goal through this event and a match week that will follow to raise $400,000 and then to raise a total of $800,000 along with a match. At Hope, it costs us $25 to serve one hardworking man or woman in a year. As I mentioned, through our collective giving and the match, we have a goal to raise $800,000, which means that together, we have the opportunity to come alongside 32,000 families or 32,000 Carroles and Valentines around the world. We're excited to be a part of this opportunity together. So if you're new to Hope, will you join with us in this work through a first gift? If you've invested in Hope before but not in the last year, would you renew your giving partnership? And if you're already a partner with us financially in this mission, first of all, thank you. And would you help us leverage this match tonight? The match will be available from November 10th until November 22nd. Would you consider joining us to take advantage of this opportunity so that together we can reach more men and women and their families, allowing them to lift their eyes and look to the hope we have? The lights are on. As I invite that, I want to name this. I hope you will invest in women and men like Carrole and Jakob and the hundreds of thousands of people in the Hope Network right now. And I hope you will be with us in the years ahead, celebrating the progress we will make together and still investing in hope, not simply because you should, but because you're part of a beautiful and redeeming work that our God is doing and that is mutually good to be a part of. What we truly want is to invite you into partnership in advancing the kingdom of God as we work together toward the end of poverty in all its forms, as we equip and empower entrepreneurs, the church, and the next generation. As Joy Ike shared so beautifully in the opening video, we have a chance to be active participants in God's love coming alive, in seeing his image bearers thrive when we come together. Thank you for considering how you might join us in this work. As you do, we invite you to join us in the doxology sung by a Hope Global Choir and followed by a benediction from Peter.
Praise God from
Thank you so much for joining us today for our global virtual event. In the words of the Apostle Paul, every time we think of you, we give thanks to God. We are so grateful for your partnership with Hope to share the love of Christ and the dignified path out of poverty with millions of people around the world. May God bless you as you are a blessing to so many.